Good morning, people of the internet. You're listening to Debi Radio 79.5 FM, a podcast where we discuss the movie Grosse Pointe Blank 1 minute at a time. I'm Dev.
And I'm Hugh, and on today's show, we are looking at minute 71. We have finally arrived at the reunion ball at the school, and we are going to be talent spotting a bunch of semi-famous faces before their time, so to speak.
That is right. And joining us on today's show, we have movie superfan Kosmas is back. Once again, he is famed in Germany for having written a record-breaking number of film reviews on IMDb. Kosmas, it's really good to have you back, buddy.
It's amazing to be back, and thank you again for having me back. It was a blast last time, and I'm pretty sure it will be the same, at least, or maybe even better this time around. So, looking forward to it.
Fantastic. I think we've got some good minutes coming up here this week. We've got the high school reunion minutes, which means we've got a bunch of different actors. As Hugh mentioned, we've also got a bunch of... this is always in my mind the main scoring segment of the movie, because we kind of cut between tracks as we cut between sequences. So you get to hear a ton of the music that we love so much about this and drove so many soundtracks to be released for this film.
Absolutely.
I think we talked about the music last time I was on too, and I think in this segment or in these minutes of the movie, it's like the best known, I guess, songs that are being played, especially the what is it, Under Pressure, right? And Take on Me.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's
Walk Like an Egyptian, and yes. So this one is Aha, Take on Me, which we actually had kick off in the last minute as they're entering the thing. They've just walked through straight for the bar, like any reasonable person would be in this situation, and they bump into Ken, played by Carlos Jacot, and that's where we pick this up. Aha still playing in the background.
I mean, we've talked before about the dual nature of this film, right? Part rom-com, part action film. And we've talked about how that personality asserts itself visually, right? We've talked about the film noir elements versus the more brightly lit small town hallmark elements for the rom-com. And the music does the same thing, right? When it's him doing his thing, it's much more indie, it's much more punk, it's much more retro. And then the moment we get to Debi Radio itself, funnily enough, but also to the ball, we start to bounce back and forth until we are mostly in the 90s itself, or 80s big hits rather than
right
indie.
Right. And this makes sense, right? Like when you do the reunion, the obvious scoring option is going to be like the big hits of the time period when you graduated, because it's the nostalgia, it's the vibe, and the big hits are the ones that everybody's going to be familiar with. You can't kind of lean too much into one genre or another. So yeah.
No, I think that's true. I mean, Cosmos, you were saying to me before we started recording we were talking about the whole notion of school dancers generally, because they're not as much of a thing outside America, but Europe does have them in some places. Do you think, I'm assuming, has your school had a reunion? Have you been to one?
Actually, yes, we did have one in December, so it's only a couple of months ago. It was only a couple of months ago, and it was like the 30-year anniversary or something. So that was fun. It was like it's called Realschule. That's until you're 16 years old, and then there's the other one where you get the diploma before you go to university. There's another 3 years. I went to another school for that one, but we did a reunion, and I think we were like about 10 people, so it wasn't that bad, considering many are not in Germany, or
okay, so it's very small scale, much more intimate.
That's for sure.
Okay.
And we didn't change that much. Like that was fun to see. Like I could still tell who's who. Who knows? Like a 50-year anniversary, we don't recognize each other anymore.
Yeah, don't recognize yourself in the mirror at that point.
Yeah, that too.
Did you guys I mean, If there was only 10 of you, was it just like dinner and drinks, or?
Drinks. I think some had something to eat, but it was more drinks. Yeah.
So this kind of big American elaborate restaging of the school dance, that's not a thing, really, is it?
Yeah, well, there was like a thing when we graduated, but it wasn't that big. Like it was like on a smaller scale than the American one. So that's one thing that I would have loved, I guess, in
Oh,
retrospect, to be a part of. Even though I guess even in America I wouldn't have been in the It crowd or whatever it's called. But it would have been fun, I guess.
so
What
yeah,
about
so
you, Hugh?
oh god, the International School of Geneva has them not just regularly; they have them in different countries. So,
Yeah.
I haven't been to any of them, mostly because probably until about 10 plus years ago, I didn't really stay in touch with people from school. I had friends from university, not so many from school, and I've slowly gotten back in touch with a lot of them either via Facebook or via my brother, because my brother continues to live in Geneva. And so he sees people both from his year group and my year group fairly regularly, because a lot of them have either stayed in Geneva or they've gone out to work in other countries and come back to Geneva. And occasionally, like when I worked in London, I just would run into people in the street, and they'd just like be over here for a little bit. So the biggest one, the big school anniversary, I can't remember how many. Is it 100 years? I can't remember. 75 years, whatever it is this year. But they're scheduling, so they've got 4 days of events scheduled over a weekend, and I know lots of people who I know are going. The problem is, it's the same weekend I've got to go with my Year 9 history trip to France as a school teacher, and I just can't, this is the big one, and I can't get away from it. And actually, I'd like to go, because it's mostly it's multiple year groups. It's because it's a school anniversary, not year group anniversaries. But also, it's going to be split. Each year group will organize its own dinner, its own drinks, its own night. So everything's slightly different, slightly tailored.
Hmm.
And I, that would be fun, and I'd like to. There's a bunch of them I'd like to see again. But musically, I don't know if we could pull off this kind of ball, because I think 80s was interesting. When I remember that my levers balls, and I remember the music at them, because I went to two, because we had this weird thing whereby everybody in the school who was going to an American university or college would be leaving us at the end of the second last year, whereas the rest of us would carry on, finish the baccalaureate, and so we had an extra year there, so that would be year 13. The year 12, Americans would do SATs in year 11, and then do advanced placements in year 12, APs. So you would have a ball, and the ball would be for that year's 12s and 13s together. So I went to the 12s one because so many of my friends were leaving. And then for my year, I was like, should I go? Don't know. It's kind of a bit kind of so about the whole thing. But musically, it was weird because everybody had different tastes, and you have to wait for that point where everyone's drunk enough that they kind of all agree that we're all going to get on the dance floor for the stuff that is being played, even when it's absolutely dire. And that's what this scene reminds me of so much, is that sense of, people are milling around and they're very awkward as adults. I mean, in this sense, I feel it's less like a reunion and much more like they've tried to show us what it would have been like when they were at school. Not as much has changed as it should have changed. Like in this
Yeah.
minute, we've got, Jacket is doing exactly what Piven's character earlier did, and doing the whole business thing, and look, I'm successful, and that's the supposedly grown up bit. But
Yeah.
then in the course of the minute, Michael Cudlitz arrives, playing
Yeah.
Bob DiStefano, and he intrudes in such a physical manner that Martin puts him in an arm lock straight away.
Oh, that's not Bob DiStefano.
Oh, my mistake.
That is actually it's.
I'm getting confused.
Oh man, I thought it was Steve Pink again, but it's not Steve Pink
Hang
either.
on. Yeah, I'm just going to run it now.
It's the guy that phones into the radio station, which.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So this is the thing. It's one person after another, but it's the increasing degrees of embarrassment as well. Yeah, yeah. There we go. Yeah, you're right. It's not
Eckhart, is it?
Oh yeah, my mistake. Yeah. So it is. Definitely, yeah. So the thing is, but the point is that you get these the as we get these intrusions, you see who hasn't grown up, who thinks it's okay to just push in, who thinks it's okay to say, "Hey, we're going to do this just like we used to do." You know, that feels very much. I imagine that's what would happen at a reunion, but I also imagine that that feels very specific to the vision of the film. They want us to see what they would have been like, so we really understand why Martin and Debbie are like, "Yeah, we had enough of that." We did not enjoy this when we were at school.
Yeah. So this character it's not Eckhart either. It's a guy called in the film, the character's name is Nathaniel, played by somebody called Patrick O'Neill, who doesn't have an extensive acting career, but interestingly came from Say Anything with John Cusack. So I think this is another case of like casting a buddy in a role for this movie.
Right. Okay.
But it shows that they're comfortable, right? The familiarity and the physicality of the acting there as he kind of bursts in and gets taken down with the awkward the awkward grab there. But I also like the tail end of this scene. I really love Carlos's acting here, because you've got, as you said, that kind of clash of the kids pretending to be adults and the adults being adults and the kids pretending to be adults is still more fun.
Yes.
And you see that, like, I don't think any of these three are particularly close to each other, right? So it's all sort of, we knew each other in high school, we remember who each other was, but we weren't really friends then, and we're probably not friends now. But the conversation between Nathaniel and Martin and Debbie instantly is what happens, and you can see in that, like, kind of around the 30-second mark, Ken clearly losing the conversation and like just being like, how do I act here? Like, how do I get back in the conversation? As Nathaniel is kind of getting in between the two groups and just forcing Ken out of the conversation. And then all of a sudden, like, Martin says, thanks for the pen, see you later, Ken. And Ken isn't even on screen at this point. Like, he's barely there.
Yeah. And we should talk about the introduction of the pen, shouldn't we?
Yes. We've got a Chekhov's pen here that needs recognition.
Chekhov's pen.
Is it a famous one?
So Chekhov's gun is the. Do you know about Chekhov's gun, Kosmas?
Well, isn't there like a game?
Yeah, it's a thing that comes out of the theater and then got applied to film, which was that it was a rule that the playwright Chekhov had, which was that if an audience sees something in an earlier scene, in this case he mentioned guns, but you could apply this to other devices. When the audience are aware of what's on stage in the beginning of the play, then if you put a gun there, so you put it above the mantelpiece, they expect that gun to be used by the end of the play. I think his exact words were, the gun has to go off by the end of the play. Now, it doesn't matter if there's a good reason or not. He's trying to make the point to playwrights that foreshadowing is a thing that audiences do understand. And so you have to think carefully about the background as well as the foreground. Films, of course, do this all the time, because you can cut an insert in or a close-up and then boom, you're out again. But of course, in this case, this pen will be important later on in the film. So it's Chekhov's pen.
Yes, and I think it's an important distinction that this was originally created for theatre, right? Because at the time that Chekhov makes this mention, your staging for a play was fairly pared down, right? It was a fairly minimalist endeavor because you didn't want to have a million props that you're having to shuffle in and out between scenes, and so items that were on the stage were there for a purpose in almost every case, right? Set dressing was much more limited. Now, in film, it's a very different scenario because films are, with a few exceptions, Dogville and the like, films are generally a real world environment, right? So you've got all of the clutter and all of the set dressing that the real world contains, right? We don't expect as an audience that those balloons or that class of 86 banner in the background to actually play a pivotal role in the film. They are providing context in the moment, but that's about it. And so film has kind of taken this to an extreme of like really dialing in on the introduction of something either via dialogue, which is what happens here, or via pointed camera work to really drive home the point to the audience. Almost the exact opposite of what Chekhov intended, right? It's saying, the film is saying, hey, audience, look at this, look at this, look at this. You're not allowed to miss it. Look at this, please look at this. And I think from my perspective, that has gone to such an extreme that it's, I always think of it as catering to the most base of audience, but it's dumbing down filmmakers' expectations of the audience to understand and to follow things. And this, I think, is the worst example of it. You've got the moment where he's opening the gun case in the hotel room and he's kind of going through and he's playing with his knife and stuff, and that's like the antithesis of this, right? Like that knife actually never features in the film at all. So one of the things that I love about this film is that it keeps the spirit of Chekhov's sentiment, but not in the Hollywood sense of it, where you've got to underscore everything to make it obvious to the audience.
I do wonder how much of that is because of something we've talked about many times, which is the editing down of the film.
I think so. I also think that this is actually something that George Armitage is pretty good at. You see it as well in Miami Blues, that he's not somebody that belabors points, right? Stuff happens and he expects the audience to keep up. And it's, the editing is quite tight. So things are moving quite fast. You definitely miss some stuff on your first view of this film, especially as a lot of the exposition happens out of order, just because it's organic and the characters do actually know a lot of what's going on. And they're not belaboring it for the audience. But yeah, I do agree. I think that because it's quite tight editing, a lot of those moments of like zoom ins and the ancillary shots just get dropped because they're not as important. And it's a demonstration of how pacing of a movie can overcome the need for the audience to understand every moment of it, which is something that's completely lost now, I feel, in most major Hollywood productions. Yeah. I'm thinking superhero movies in particular.
Yeah. Marvel never saw a gun they didn't want to fire.
Right. I mean, they'll spend 5 minutes talking about it like it's a Men in Black prop, and then it's going to go off at some point, and it's probably had more time build up than actual execution in the film, right?
Yeah. No, I do think that's a thing. Kosmas?
Yeah, a completely different thing. Because I think they did a good job with. I mean, it's only mentioned and I didn't think it was too much, to say thank you for the pen, but so I thought that was okay. But a different thing that I realized, and this Newberry and Oldbury throwaway joke that Minnie is doing. I mean, it sounds fun, but is there anything? Is this a drink? Because I didn't. I have no idea. I've never heard that expression before. Like, is that?
It's just a play on her name. So her full name is Debi Newberry. And
okay.
So Nathaniel,
I thought it was about the drink. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no. So Nathaniel is saying, like, still very Newberry, like, you're still looking great after these 10 years.
Yeah, so she's like, no, I'm
she's
older,
like, yeah, I feel very old at this point. So it's just a little play on words with her name, which happens again in a few minutes that I think we get to this week. Hopefully we get to this week because we can call back to it then.
For sure.
But yeah, it is that thing where for a film that hasn't done a lot of punning, there is some joking around that comes out at this stage. And again, there's that slightly more subtle humor that we had between Debbie and Martin, and now we're with all the other other former students. You realize, you see the drop in the quality of the joking. Even as adults, they got rubbish senses of humor.
It's very
Okay,
comfortable, right? Like you can like Debbie is very much the character that likes the play on words and the puns, and Martin sometimes does it, but is, as you said in last week's in Friday's Minute last week, um, Martin is a very different character when he's interacting with everybody than he was in high school, right? He's become this kind of not James Bond. It's not as polished as James Bond, but somewhat more suave, much better at the adulting, and acting almost like everybody is a new business acquaintance potentially, rather than just a bunch of folks that I went to high school with. And Ken is the other person who's operating on this same level
Yeah.
of like,
Yeah, they're in work mode
yeah,
at a social do.
exactly. And that relationship is why that pen sequence, as you said, Cosmos, actually works in this and doesn't feel like, that reduction to the base level, because that's exactly what would happen in this environment if, like, two adult guys trying to connect on a business level, professional level.
Yeah.
Yes. And I mean, he never lets his guard down either. I mean, the thing that you mentioned with the hand, where he's attacking him, sort of like yeah, it's like an instinct for him, like, right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's another thing that I mean, he should be loose and just enjoy the moment, but he can't. Like he's always in.
He's
Yeah.
always on.
Prepared. Yeah, he's always on. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. But you know what?
Yeah.
Like, other films would have made a bigger deal out of that. Other films would have made a much bigger deal out of him doing the thing with the hand. But it's like it's an action movie trope, right? Where the guy goes, and holds him down. Jackie Chan does it. Everybody does it, right? But here it's just like over and done with so quickly, because that's because he knows. He suddenly goes, "Oh, where am? Oh, I mustn't be doing this. Not here." Like it's just like, "Oh, look, you tripped."
Yeah.
Like really, and somehow the guy just buys it, and it's like, oh yeah, like how much have you had to drink already?
Yeah, probably, yeah.
I think he also is a little bit like, oh, he's pissed about me because of my comment on the radio, right? Because he brings that up again, which I think is actually very much a call for the audience. I think,
yes.
I mean, maybe Martin didn't hear it the first time around, but he's just making that assumption because of Martin's reaction, I think. But Debbie obviously heard it. Debbie clearly knows who Nathaniel is, right? Like, I mean, she's not going to have forgotten, I suspect, someone who seems to be a fairly regular caller into the radio show from her high school. But I love the fact that we've been bouncing all over this minute as well.
This is the fun thing, though. They do pack. I mean, Armitage's editing packs so much into this minute.
Yeah, and the dialogue as well, right? The dialogue really drives it. And I have not actually pulled up our fourth edition script, but I suspect that a good chunk of this is actually in that.
Yeah, I was about to say I've got it on screen, but I haven't actually looked at it to compare. Like you say, I'm pretty sure most of it won't be actually.
I also, like, going even further back towards the beginning of the minute. I do love the mostly in divorce, some property, some personal injury. Those all seem kind of related. Back and forth between them. It's just so tidily done. And then Ken really sells that kind of awkward lawyer with the it's a great line, I'll take that line.
Yeah. It's just like, what? Oh, dear, just the idea it's related cracks me up. I should not laugh at the idea that divorce and injury.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they absolutely are, right? Like, I
wouldn't know. I'm
totally
not divorced.
Yeah, me neither. But I just thought, because you talked about editing, sorry, and we're jumping back and forth again. But because you talked about it, it seems like there's like only like two camera positions. Like it's like it edited, it does edit, but you know what I mean? Like it seems like there's only two camera angles, maybe a third one when he does the thing with the arm. But other than that, and they just switch back and forth, like the two-shot thing, I think it's called, right? And I love it. Like it's really simple. Like there's no insert. We don't go close up on things except for the hand thing. So yeah, it's amazing. I mean, it's so many things happening, but you can still concentrate on the dialogue.
Yeah, especially with such a busy backdrop, right? With all of the background cast and everything moving around, and I think lowering that camera angle slightly so that you're looking up at them a bit, so that they are very big, much bigger, and their heads are above the background crowd. Really helps with that as well. And it narratively, it doesn't really work because it's not, you're exaggerating their importance, but in this environment, they're not necessarily like important per se in an abstract sense. They are important for, from our perspective as viewers, but and that camera angle also seems to get less sharp, less severe once Nathaniel steps into the frame. So that's also an interesting touch, that they've kind of lifted that camera to kind of level everybody off a bit more then. I wonder if it's also a little bit because Ken and Martin are basically the same height, Carlos and John Cusack, which
that would make sense.
Is because that's unusual for most of the cast to be as tall as John Cusack in this film. I've noticed most everybody else is a little bit shorter, including Nathaniel, who doesn't have nearly the same height.
Is it the angle then? Because isn't Debbie this also about the same height, or am I wrong about?
Well, she's in heels at the moment. And she's
that's of course.
Yeah,
good point.
and they're a unit at the moment, so it's kind of like
working that way. Yeah, yeah, sure.
Okay, shall we?
I just realized. Do they have name tags, or was it just
They do have name tags. Yeah, so
I didn't see one on John Cusack, right?
Am
I wrong?
I think he may have elected not to put it on.
Yeah. Because in the previous minute, we had the whole conversation at the table.
Yeah.
About them, and he got given one.
Okay.
But I think he just put it in his pocket.
Yeah.
He doesn't actually want people to know who he is if they can't remember.
Yeah.
Part of that whole security thing of his again,
For sure.
But yeah, everybody else is definitely wearing this. Debbie is not wearing hers either, I don't think.
Yeah, no, I think the pair of them have literally just pocketed them and got on with
Which, honestly, like, I can totally see that was the kind of high schoolers they were anyway, is that they were the ones that would, like, flout the rules wherever they could get away with it kind of thing.
This was minute 71 of the Grosse Pointe Blank podcast, Debi Radio 79.5 FM, featuring your co-hosts, co-writers, and co-producers, Dev Soligo and Hugh David.
Today's guest, and our guest again for this week, is Kosmas, film reviewer extraordinaire. You can where can we find you, Kosmas?
Instagram, X, the Twitter thing, and IMDb, as you already mentioned. Yes.
Fantastic. You can also find us at YouTube and X and all of those places, Spotify as well, at Debi Radio, as well as on all good podcast players, presumably like the one you're listening to us on, or if you're watching us on YouTube, you can find us on podcast players, as well as on our website, debiradio.com. And for all of those, it is DEBI Radio, Debbie spelt like in the movie.
And then if you want to come and chat with us, come and find us at the Facebook listeners group, which is also Debi Radio 79.5 FM Fan Club. That's Debi Radio, DEBI Radio 79.5 FM Fan Club.
Sure was clear that all of this was new. Concentrating hard like a little girl, smoking for the first time. It wasn't a moment, it was a feeling.